This video is going to be about it's going to be like a sort of a continuation on the previous mid fights. Part one. This will sort of be going into like part two and like another topic. A lot of this will be sort of derived from this basic concept of this, which is information. When you're given information, there is some type of action that you should take. Right? So when you hear something, right, like someone says Lucio low, there is some action. It's a very bad example, but like for example, I hear maybe like they're looking to grab, there's an action of what you should do, right? So this whole scope will be about like information and action, and we'll define sort of what's good information, and we'll define like what are some of the actions. Okay. So first, right, we're going to be talking a lot about two different things. What I like to call dynamic comms, and then we're going to talk about what are like command calls. Okay. So the first thing is what are dynamic comms, okay? Or calls, you can call them whatever you want, right? So basically this is like critical information that someone is saying on your team during a mid fight, and that leads to like making an important decision, okay? So I'll give you a very straight up basic example. Is maybe someone says the enemy team is looking, or their Zarya's looking to grab, the Zarya's looking to grab, right? Action is let's fucking run down the Zarya, my language, right? Or like maybe the other example could be like I'm close to beat, right? Which then means like play, and like that action is play slow, right? Maybe you're in a mid fight situation where you need to like, you know, if you get beat, you push back in, you go really aggressive, right? So those are two examples, and I'll give you some more. But it's sort of like critical information that has some action that gives your team value. Okay, and anyone can say this type of stuff, right? Preferably, and I'll talk about like how that works as well. Okay, so first for dynamic comms. Right, so it is critical critical information, right, that is normally during it's like sort of given to your team, or like said to your team during like mid fights. Okay, so, and again, I'm gonna sort of like put this somewhere over here. Info goes to action, right? So some information gives some action. Okay, so let's use like sort of like another example. We'll use like a broad examples, right? So for example, alts, right? Alts are like really big, right? So for example, what you can say is for like the enemy team, right? If they do something like they are looking, oh, one sec, I'm gonna quickly do one more thing. Oh, 1 minute, chat. Okay. They are looking to grab, right? That immediately means like, okay, they're looking to grab, like, do we have some alt to counter, right? Do we have like alt to counter? Do we need to look to push into the Zarya, right? Do we need to like play to live, right? Do we have CDs, right? Like there's like a whole bunch of things that can like happen, right? Like if once a statement's said, right? So it's like an important statement, right? You could also sort of word this a little bit differently, where you could say something along the lines of like they're looking to, right? You could also say like they are going to, right? You could also say like they are close. So you could say like they are close to Pharah alt, right? And like then immediately, you know, the information might be like, okay, again, like focus Pharah, right? Or maybe the info might be something else. Someone else could say like I have DM, right? Or maybe someone could say something else like I can trans if needed, right? So like there's some information, there's some action or something else is said that like helps the team to deal with said information. Okay. Now what's interesting, right, is when you think of it at a little bit more of a higher level, and it's just sort of optimizations, right? You want to reduce the amount of clutter in your comms, right? So sometimes what'll happen is like person one on your team will say like one sec. Oh, actually, I'll get to this in a second. So this is the enemy team, right? Now let's say you're on your team. And we're talking about team on your ultimates, right? So ults for your team. So someone could say on your team is like, you know, like we are close to beat. We are close to beat, like play slow. Yikes. Man, I really struggling here. We are close to beat, play slow. Right? That's like a very simple thing, right? There's again information, action, right? Another example could be like, I'm looking to shatter. Which means probably like pressure Reinhardt, right? Like pressure the enemy Reinhardt, right? Maybe look to break shield. Maybe you can Kree-ult to break shield. Maybe you can do some clever wall-to-wall off the Ryan, right? You could, there's a whole bunch of, you can boop them. You know, there's a bunch of things, right? Now, with this example here, at a higher level, right? There, you want to minimize the comms that are happening, right? And if you remember with like sort of my communication stuff, right? You want people calming, you know, for themselves. So, for example, if you know your Ryan player says, "I'm looking to shatter," right? Then you know someone else can say like, "Okay, yeah, I can look to McCree ult, right? I can McCree ult to shield." And then it's only two people, right? Like talking here, which is like really good. But maybe like I don't know, maybe your Sigma player says, you know, we're close, you know, we're close to like we're close to shatter, right? So then the Ryan says, okay, yeah, I am looking for it, right? Then your Kree says something, right? So now you have three people talking here, which again is just fine. At least someone's saying something, right? But in general, it's obviously better if only two people are calling it, right? Also, if this person's calling it for the Reinhardt, the Ryan may not be comfortable with actually using shatter in this situation, right? It might be like not a good time to shatter for some reason, right? Because you should know your own ult the best. So just something to keep in mind. Okay. Like we can also like relate this whole concept, right, about ultimates, right? Like they're close to grab, right? They're looking to like barrage, right? Right. We can also relate this to, this is alts, right? We can like relate it to like CDs and cooldowns, right? So we can say like CDs, right, for enemy. We can say like, you know, Sombra no translocator, which immediately means like if we see Sombra, like kill Sombra, right? You could say something along the lines of maybe like D.Va no DM, which then means like, okay, we can finally grab now, right? Or we can Mei ult, right? And I can just keep giving these. Like you can say like a big one is like they have no lamp. Right? It's huge, right? Like if we have lamp and they don't have lamp, we can hard it, right? As for your team, right? You could say something along the lines of, right, like you could say my shield is low, right? And that tells your team maybe to play slow or like find cover, right? You could also say maybe like your Zarya, you could say like I have bubbles. Bubbles, right? Which tells your Reinhardt, okay, time to aggro, right? So like a lot of these little small little snippets of information, right? Well, again, they're information, right? And it gives an action. That action is maybe something tempo related, where you want to play fast or slow. Maybe it could be focus, right? Like, but it has an action, right? And that's what makes it super important, right? Because in general, what's actually happening here at a very high level is you're actually having some macro or some micro thing that you're noticing lead to a macro decision normally. Or it could be a micro, something micro that you're noticing lead to something where on your team, like they're making their own, like for example, maybe you say like they have low shield, right? Then your Ryan's like, okay, cool, I can look for a shatter, right? So like that might the enemy's like, you know, shield is low. If that's enemy's like a micro thing, then your Ryan sort of looks for like their ultimate. It's only the shatter, right? Macro thing would be like, okay, they have no lamp, we have lamp, let's int, right? And the macro is like the tempo of you just going aggressive, like as a team, right? So in general, like the small informations that you can get right can help, like, you know, give in like sort of guide people with actions is what I'm getting at. Okay. Okay, next thing really fast, trying to not take too long here. The other thing, right, is the next one, right, is we talked about alts, we talked about CDs, right? The next one is a very simple thing, which is like group up calls. Group up calls, right? So group up calls, right, is sort of very simply, you can say something like stabilize on me, right? Or you could say stabilize point. You could say stabilize on an area. Stabilize on like statue, like King's Row, for example. Okay, or like arches, right? And that I mean, like if you're playing a really fast-paced comp, right, or you're in a mid fight and like you're up 2 or something, and you just need to live for a second, you can say stabilize like left corner, right? Everyone just lives for a second, like get CDs back, then you push back in, right? So yeah. Also, I will do the dynamic comms, or not the dynamic comms, the command calls on another one, so it doesn't go past 10 minutes because I'm trying to keep it, not too long. Trying to keep it very short and concise. Okay, the next thing, right, is it's sort of like I'll talk about who says these things and like, when and why they should be used, okay? Now, these are like just 3 examples of sort of dynamic comms, right? Like I sort of talked about alts, I talked about CDs, I talked about like, like group up stuff. There's obviously a lot more examples you can use for like, dynamic comms, but these are something that's really important. And in general, like the biggest thing you sort of want to take away from this is like information, right, leads to some type of action, right? And then like being able as an individual, you need to be able to understand what this info is and what the action is. This is what like is important, right? And this is what people, in my opinion, struggle with sometimes. Okay, and obviously a lot of this is listening, right? Okay. So in very general sake, in very general terms, right? Like who should be saying these comms? Well, the answer is like anyone. Anyone on your team can say, I'm close to beat, I'm close to beat, I want to aggro beat an int, or they don't have lamp, I have lamp, I want to push, right? Like anyone can say that type of stuff, right? And this whole concept, right, allows your team to be more flexible because it doesn't depend on one person to like say things, right? And mid fights, after you're alt tracking, you're planning, like you're like maybe your plan in the start of the fight is we're gonna look for a grab, right? And if that doesn't work, then maybe we're gonna look for, I don't know, shatter, right? And maybe for some reason they trance the grab and then they beat the shatter and the fight's still going on, right? So like, and you don't know what to do because there's no like information, there's no action, like you're just randomly calling targets, and that's fine, right? But then maybe you notice like your Sombra's closing EMP, and you Sombra, you're like, I'm almost EMP, I can EMP him, I can EMP, right? And then you EMP and you sort of go off that, right? So like these mid fight comms can help with like giving more action and getting a plan in the mid fight, which is really important. The next thing I'll add to it, right, now that I said this, big note, okay, don't overuse these, right? Don't overuse these. Don't have like one person on your team try and do it for like everyone, okay? That is microing, right? And like microing is like not fun, and some people don't like that, right? So I mean, obviously if you're in a lower team and like not many people talk, sure, fine, makes a bit more sense, right? But if you're a higher level team, like other people can talk and other people can say things. So and don't overuse it. Don't just try and say things like useless information for like no reason, right? There should be a reason on why you're saying something, right? Like if you're saying this information, you better understand what the action is yourself, right? Otherwise, why are you saying it? Okay. Okay. And the last, like who, we sort of already talked about this, but very briefly, like when, right? Like, so when should these be used, right? In mid fights. And we already said why, because at the start of fights, you should already have a plan and whatnot, right? This is when your plan's sort of gone, right? And the fight's still digressing and it's going on for quite a while, and like, you need to do stuff, right? Another way of also looking at this is like if for some reason, like the start of your fight, like the plan, like didn't work. It didn't work, or like it couldn't happen. It could, one sec. I want to see that. Like for example, like let's say like you want to like Sombra EMP, but for some reason, for example, your Sombra just got like forced out, right? If that happens, right, then like you maybe need something else, right? So if like the yikes, if couldn't, I don't know why it just looks really weird to me. It couldn't happen, right? So like if for some reason it couldn't happen for something, right, then you can like make some other like dynamic plan.